Tonight is Professor Lorraine Whitmarsh, who is the Director of the Centre for Climate Change and Social Transformations.
Thank you very much, Sally. It's really lovely to be with you, everybody. Thanks for the invitation, and I'm so happy that you chose behaviour change as one of your topics to discuss, because I think it's a hugely important topic. It's what I spend most of my life thinking about, so really happy to be talking about it with you today. So yeah, I think behaviour change is really essential for tackling climate change, and I'm not alone. The UK Committee on Climate Change, that's the government's official advisors, estimate that about 60% of the measures that we will need to reach our national climate change targets will require at least some behaviour change by consumers. So things like we'll need to buy electric vehicles, install heat pumps, eat less red meat and dairy, waste less in general. But that's just the sorts of things that we can do as consumers, but that's not our only role in life. We also need to change what we're doing in workplaces, in communities, in schools, governments, and local authorities need to change what they're doing. So there are huge opportunities to change behaviour in all areas of our lives, actually. So I would estimate that the vast majority of the measures needed to tackle climate change will require us to do things differently. Oh, it's moved on. We'll need to kind of eat differently, play differently, travel differently, shop differently, and so on. So what specifically are the sorts of behaviours that we will need to change? Well, this figure, and I don't have too many figures, you might be pleased to know, but this one I thought was worth including because it quantifies the impact of different behaviour changes we could make to reducing our carbon footprint. So this is the number of tons of carbon dioxide saved if we do these various things. And so this is the sort of top 10 most effective things we can do. So living car-free is the most impactful thing we can do. Shifting to an electric vehicle instead of a petrol or diesel vehicle comes close. Flying less is also pretty impactful. And I've colour-coded these, by the way. The blue bars mean things to do with transport. So you can see shifting to public transports there as well. The green things are more to do with energy. So things like using renewable energy, maybe installing a solar panel or something like that, or getting your energy supplied from a renewable company. Insulating your home is there as well. And we've got one red one here, which is a diet one. So it's to do with food choices. So if we cut down on red meat and dairy, that makes quite a big difference, actually. And if we go as far as becoming vegan, then that makes an even bigger difference. So that would be one of the most impactful things we could do. So these are the sorts of things which are our sort of top 10 most effective things. And just to put that in context, recycling saves about 0.01 tonne of CO2 per year. So relatively speaking, recycling isn't that effective. It's still worth doing. It still does make some difference, but it gives you a sense of the sort of scale of doing different things. And so actually travel behaviours, energy behaviours are a big thing we could change. The good news is that actually people are concerned about climate change and they know a fair bit about it as well. And we've seen concern about climate change rising in recent years. And actually we're at sort of record levels of concern about climate change at this point. And recent polls, for example, show that about 3/4 of the UK public agree that if individuals like me don't act now to tackle climate change, we will be failing future generations. So I think most people do accept that we'll need to change our behaviour to tackle climate change, but often it is more difficult than just wanting to do the right thing. A lot of us struggle to change our behaviour because it can be inconvenient or more expensive, or maybe sometimes we're just not sure exactly what is the most effective thing to do. And so our behaviour change isn't sort of matching this level of concern that we've seen amongst the public. So what can we actually do to help people change their behaviour? Well, we categorize measures into two categories. We talk about either downstream measures, and this is where you're influencing people directly in terms of their choices. And so we're talking about things like information and education here. So we're all used to kind of going to the supermarket and seeing lots of labels on products that maybe encourage us to choose more healthy foods, like these sorts of traffic light things that tell us about the sugar and fat in things. And that might influence our choices if we choose to look at those sorts of labels. So information like that and other types of information can be quite effective to some extent. But actually what tends to be more effective is upstream measures, as we call them. These are things which change the situation that we're acting in. So they might change the prices of things. So economic measures that make high carbon products more expensive and low carbon products cheaper. Or they might change the availability of different products. So maybe even banning the most polluting products. Or it might involve changing the physical environment around us. So we're talking about maybe the design of towns and cities and the design of buildings so that they're more energy efficient and encouraging us to save energy. So these sort of upstream measures are really important as well. But just thinking about the downstream, information can be really helpful, because actually it turns out we don't always know exactly what is the most effective thing to do. So maybe you were surprised at the extent to which recycling isn't as effective as things like changing your travel habits. And we know that people generally aren't very aware about the role of diet in in tackling climate change. So we can do more to tell people about those things. And actually, a lot of the supermarkets are about to start trialing climate labels. So we will have more information about what sorts of products are better or worse for the environment. Crucially, though, communicating with people, giving people information is most effective when it targets what people care about. So if you can tell people this low carbon product is also cheaper, or it's more convenient if you cycle, for example, it'll save you time compared to driving, or cutting down on red meat is actually good for your health, or it can help your family or your community. If you emphasize those other benefits that people do care about, actually we know information can be really effective in that case. And in fact, a lot of the things we can do to tackle climate change do benefit us in those wider ways. And they can benefit society as well, like creating green jobs, for example. We can also use social influence as well when we're trying to talk to people and communicate with people, because we know people are really influenced by other people. We kind of, well, unconsciously, we kind of want to do what's normal, what other people are doing and what's the right thing to do. And so, for example, we sort of look around us and we sort of look at what our neighbours are doing. And if we see that they might have an electric vehicle or a solar panel, we think, oh, I wonder if that's something I could try. And so we see actually that is one of the things that happens, is that neighbours do copy one another because they realise it's an option for them too. And we're influenced by...
Sorry, just to let you know, you've got 2 minutes left.
Okay. And we're influenced by our friends, family, colleagues as well. So actually, the message here then is that we can help people around us to see that climate change action is normal when we start taking low carbon actions. If we start walking or cutting down on red meat, for example, we can help create new norms that are low carbon. And even telling people that a lot of other people are starting to do this can be quite effective. But I do want to emphasize that those sorts of informational approaches that I've just mentioned, labels, using kind of social influence, are not generally very effective. So they can change behavior by a couple of %. But actually information is important in addition to other measures. So what we really need to do is remove the barriers to behavior change, make climate action easy, cheap, normal, attractive. So as well as telling people, encouraging people what to do, we need to make it easier and more attractive. So just to give you a couple of examples, in one study, they changed the menus in several canteens so that instead of there being one of the 4 options was vegetarian, they increased that to 2 of the 4 options. So you could still buy meat, but half of the menu was vegetarian. And that alone increased vegetarian and vegan sales by up to 80% in some of the cases. Similarly, in a study on energy use, they changed the default energy tariff to being a renewable tariff, and that increased uptake of that tariff by 90% in many cases. And in studies which have looked at where councils have reduced the amount of space on the road from cars and given more of that space to bikes and pedestrians, that has been found to significantly encourage people to walk and cycle. So these sorts of changes that make it easier, make it more attractive, make it more the default to do green things are really effective. So just summing up.
Just to let you know, sorry, we are at 10 minutes now.
Okay, all right. So you can see my conclusion here. Behavior change is really important in lots of ways, but it can also improve our lives. And we need to do more than just give people information. We need to make it easy and cheaper for people to do the right thing. And there are lots of examples of what works. And I shall stop now.
That's great. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so next we are joined by Luke Murphy, who is the Associate Director for the Energy, Climate, Housing and Infrastructure team at the Institute for Public Policy Research. I'll give you a warning when you've got 2 minutes left, Luke.
Perfect, and thanks very much for having me. It's really a pleasure to be here tonight to speak to you all. I'm just going to share my screen, which hopefully will work. 1 second. Can everyone see that? No?
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. Doesn't always work first time. Perfect. So I'm going to talk to you a bit about what communities are doing across the country in terms of climate action. So firstly, I think the good news is that communities across the country are already making progress in collectively addressing the climate crisis, and they're doing it in a whole range of areas, as you can see on your screen. They're doing it in community-owned wind or solar, and this is from small-scale projects on solar rooftop projects to large commercial-scale wind farms. They're doing it as part of community-supported agriculture, where communities have come together and set up partnerships, and they either own or direct and or manage local farms. They're running community allotments and gardens, where they're creating community growing spaces and taking over abandoned land plots to collectively grow food. Things called community land trusts, who manage land trusts are effectively set up by local people, and they either buy or are gifted land, and they use this land to create affordable and energy efficient housing. Communities are doing things like creating community-led safe streets and travel initiatives. So things like electric car clubs, installing community electric vehicle charging points, and organising cycling and walking initiatives as well. Just 3 more to mention: circular economy initiatives, so things like swap shops and libraries of things, so reuse, or local recycling enterprises and repair cafes where communities are coming together.
Can I ask you, sorry Luke, to just explain what you mean by circular economy?
Sure. Circular economy is essentially where we are reusing or repackaging goods for reuse. So it might be, for example, rather than throwing out your mobile phone, you taking it to a local community repair shop, having it fixed, and then someone else is able to use that phone. So it's really just ensuring that things that we use and goods that we buy aren't just thrown away. The materials for them or the actual products themselves are reused for others to utilize. Finally, I'll just say rewilding and community-owned woodland. So there's examples of communities leasing woodland, managing reforesting or rewilding local woodland under that community collective ownership. So there's lots of examples of community climate action happening across the country. I'm just going to pick out one example actually, I think, given time, which is, and this I think this relates a lot to what Lorraine was just saying about why people get involved in climate action. So there's an organisation called Ambition Lawrence Weston, and this is a community-led organisation. And in their own words, they've been doing a lot on climate, but only by accident. So they've been undertaking a range of energy efficiency and energy generation measures. So for this community, the reason why they've got into this is their priority was the need to alleviate poverty, reduce fuel bills, and tackle fuel poverty in particular. And this is an area where 70% of residents say that they struggle to pay heating and electricity bills. Ambition Lawrence Weston worked with their partners Bristol Energy Network, and they delivered a project which employs thermal imaging to spot weaknesses in the energy efficiency of homes. And having done that, I worked with local traders to then fix the drafty windows, insulate the lofts, and charging a fee only to those who can afford it. As a result of this community initiative, a number of fuel poor households have been able to improve the energy efficiency of their homes and reduce their energy costs. They're now working to become an energy generating community. So going much further, and they've now got plans to build an onshore wind turbine to expand the community energy production. So just to tell you a little bit about the kind of benefits that that's going to deliver, the turbine which they're planning to build, which will be owned by the community, will generate enough electricity to power nearly 4,000 homes, and it will bring in an income as well, generating an income of between £50,000 and £400,000 a year, depending on the level of borrowing costs. And finally, they'll be making some serious CO2 savings, reducing greenhouse gas emissions as a result of the project as well. But I just wanted to say a little bit about what the benefits are of community climate action, having mentioned the kind of range of things that different communities are doing. And this really builds on the kind of things that Lorraine was just saying just now. First of all, in our experience and the research that we've done, the evidence suggests that action by community schemes and groups can actually help create a consensus amongst the wider community for action to reduce emissions and also restore nature. So that's the first thing. That's the first big benefit. Second of all, it helps create engagement and understanding around the new technologies and understanding about what needs to be done as knowledge spreads about positive actions and what can be done. Thirdly, agency. I don't know about others, but I certainly spend a lot of time worrying what I can do to tackle the climate crisis, and sometimes it can be overwhelming. A lot of these groups provide that route for people to actually take action themselves beyond their kind of individual action that they can take. And finally, we would certainly argue effectiveness. Communities often know what needs to be done. So you are all experts in your own lives. You all know more about your community than anyone else, and who better to respond to local challenges than yourselves and the local community, and can often that kind of local knowledge and local experience can help deliver more effective outcomes when working in partnership with local government and others. A little bit around key issues. I just wanted to say what are the key things that might make, in our experience and the research that we've done, that might make community groups attempting to tackle these issues a success. First of all, is a strong vision for action. And this really builds on what Lorraine was saying. And again, why organisations like Ambition Lawrence Weston, which I talked about a moment ago, got into this. Actually, the most successful ones don't just focus on addressing the climate crisis alone. They're focusing on the jobs that can be created, the energy bills that can be lowered, the fuel poverty that can be addressed, or the cleaner air that can be delivered as a result of the community project. Second is inclusion and diversity. The community groups that are most successful tend to be those that are more effective in efforts to incorporate people from all backgrounds. Thirdly is volunteer engagement. Many of these community groups do rely on volunteer engagement and volunteer support and volunteer time. And the most effective ones are the ones that make it easy for volunteers to get involved, whether that be from 1 hour a week or more time if those that want to participate have it. External professional support. Quite often, many of the organisations we've worked with and that we've done research on,
2 minutes left, just to let you know.
Thanks. Such as Ambition, Lawrence Weston, have had external professional support. Many groups do need that kind of support to guide them through maybe the planning process or how to interact with the energy system. That external professional support can be really key. Funding support. Funding is not the only thing, but it is often critical to success. And lastly, the importance of relationships and networks. The most effective ones are founded on the recognition that you need to bring together the relationships between people and different organisations in a local community with different skills that can complement each other and help the community group to succeed. Just a few ideas about what that we've recommended that might help enable more community groups to form across the country to tackle the climate crisis. Some ideas at national level. So we've argued that the national government should devolve more power and money to local councils who can then better support communities who want to set up these kind of groups. The idea of a community right to own and manage, and that's nothing more than giving communities a greater right to be able to bid on land in their local area through their local council, or the idea of a community wealth fund, funding provided by national government to local communities to spend it with the freedom decided by that local community. So without strings attached, it's left up to the community to decide. And then at the local level, more information and advice provided by local councils on what support is out there, what information there is, providing space for groups to meet, but also potentially land as well, provided at low cost or loaned to communities to develop these projects, supporting by providing funding, or finally by providing professional support. So those are just some of the ideas for potentially enabling more community action across the country as well. Thanks very much.
Right on time, thank you very much. Okay, and last but not least, we are joined by Karen Mitchell from Cumbria Action for Sustainability. Are you there, Karen? Hiya. I'll give you a 2-minute warning when you're getting close to the end. Thanks.
That's great. Thank you very much. It's great to be here, and it's great for me also to hear Luke and Lorraine. I hope what I say will chime with their presentations, and it also brings it home to Cumbria. I'm just going to share my screen. Can you see that okay? Brilliant. So CAFS, Cumbria Action for Sustainability, is a charity. We're working Cumbria-wide, and our vision is a zero carbon Cumbria. And that means that we focus on encouraging low carbon living. And so we work to do that with individuals, communities, businesses, local authorities, and other organisations to help make that behaviour change that we have heard from Luke and Lorraine needs to happen. So we know that tackling climate change means that people's lives are going to have to change, and we know that we're all starting from a very different place in terms of our understanding of the scale and urgency of the change needed, the know-how, the skills and the support to change, and the funds. So one of the key principles that we follow at Cumbria Action for Sustainability is to focus on the positives. So we emphasise the beneficial outcomes of the changes we need to make, what we call the co-benefits. So for example, we have identified the thousands of jobs that could be created in West Cumbria from more renewable energy generation from solar, wind and hydro. We also focus on the benefits from making our houses more energy efficient, in that it makes them more comfortable to live in and cheaper to run. We focus on the benefits that come from changing how and what we consume, the food, the drink, the clothes, the appliances, that lead to less meat in our diets, healthier diets, money saved, more things repaired or reused, and less waste. We focus on the fact that doing less driving and flying less, replacing those with walking, more cycling, more public transport can reduce air pollution, increase people's health through more active travel options, save money, and provide more public transport to help connect people in the remote rural areas that we have in Cumbria. So one of our principles is that we accentuate the positive. Another principle is that we try to find different levers to pull on for different people, because we know that people respond to different messages and are motivated differently. So we think about the people we're trying to reach. We think about what our community's worried about or what they're inspired by. We look at where they hang out. We look at the gaps in knowledge and action in Cumbria. So there are those two things that we do. We're positive, and we do lots of different things to reach diverse audiences. And then we take basically three approaches which are interlinked. We do what we call broad and light projects. So this is where we aim to influence large numbers of people in all walks of life in Cumbria to start them on the journey to behaviour change. We aim to raise their awareness and understanding of climate change, how it's happening, why it's happening, what it means for the world, but also what it means for their lives in Cumbria. And we raise awareness of the solutions that are readily available. And we do this by running lots and lots of events and training courses. We put out lots of information through our website, videos on YouTube. We get into the local news as much as possible, TV, radio, newspapers. We've been running training programs, for example, for the staff of organisations such as local authorities to introduce them to the science of climate change and to the solutions. And we'll have put around 800 people through that training over the last 12 months. We also work with young people in schools to help raise their awareness of climate change and the actions they can take. We run events about things like the pros and cons of electric vehicles, about changing to new low carbon home heating systems. We might have 20 people attend those events, we might have 120 people. We also support numerous community groups across Cumbria for them to run their own events on all sorts of things, such as growing local food or running repair cafes where people can bring their broken appliances or clothes or furniture to have them repaired. We help those community groups put on interesting, engaging films and talks. So collectively, our work and that of the community groups, through that we're reaching thousands of people. So what happens next is that some people will not quite be ready yet to think about it. Life is complicated enough, and there might be a bit of putting your head in the sand or in the water. Some people want to know more. They will read, or they'll Google, they'll look for more information. They might join one of those local community groups. Some people will talk about it with their friends, family, work colleagues, spread interest in it. And some people will act on what they now know. So they might turn their heating down, they might take up cycling, they might replace their light bulbs with more energy efficient versions. So we call this our broad and light approach, as I've said, and it will lead to some behaviour change, but it has a ripple effect amongst people's networks and friendship groups and communities. It probably won't save much carbon. It's actually quite difficult for us to assess that. So our next challenge is then how to turn those ripples into waves in Cumbria. So the second approach we take is more targeted, and it's what we call narrow and deep. So we secure funding to work with specific groups or communities to implement change through exemplary projects. And one example of this is the work we did with the community in Thwaites to help bring about the installation of a publicly owned and accessible electric vehicle charge point for those people in the area who can't charge at home, or for those businesses passing through the area using electric vehicles who need a charge. Another example is our Coal to Cosy Homes scheme, which is targeted at people in Cumbria who are at risk of fuel poverty. So these are people who are living in damp, drafty, hard to heat homes, which makes the cost of heating too high. So we go there and install draft proofing and energy efficient light bulbs. We help people understand their fuel bills and how to use their heating more efficiently. And in some cases, we can enable more significant changes such as new boilers or cavity wall insulation. Another example is our work with the Ambleside community. Over the last few years, we've helped a group of 10 or so people create a thriving community interest company called Ambleside Action for a Future, or AFAF for short. And we've been supporting their interest in solar energy generation, helping them to understand the potential for solar energy. We've discovered that the town could generate around 60% of its own electricity if solar panels were installed in all the right places. And we're now helping them to secure funding to scale up the solar panel installation. We've also created carbon footprint calculators for households and businesses in Ambleside to use, and these are actually available for anyone to use on our website. So we've now got some waves that we've created now. We've got broad awareness amongst large numbers of people. We've got several exemplary projects in more targeted places where action has been taken to reduce carbon emissions, and we showcase those projects and promote them to other areas. We've involved individuals, households, community groups, and other organisations in diverse projects. We're putting lots of information out there through lots of different channels. But the third part of our work is to ensure all this diversity of action adds up to more than the sum of its parts. So we want to ensure that the actions of individuals and organisations has an impact on what we call the gatekeepers of emissions in Cumbria. So these are the organisations and individuals that set out the plans and strategies which can make a big difference to carbon emissions across Cumbria.
That's just your 2-minute warning there.
Thank you. Oops, sorry, I've lost my place. Yeah. Sorry, yes. So we create opportunities for the public interest and actions to be shown to local authorities, utilities companies, business groups, and big businesses like Sellafield. And it feels like in Cumbria, we are now seeing a bigger wave of interest. It's more like a tsunami. We've got action and results on carbon emissions. And a large indicator of this is that we now have in Cumbria something called the Zero Carbon Cumbria Partnership. So this is a group of over 70 organisations, all the local authorities in Cumbria, the National Park, businesses, educational institutions, a whole heap of local community groups. It's a group that's co-chaired by CAFS and Cumbria County Council, and those organisations are now working together to plan the pathway to zero carbon for those emissions over which we have most control in Cumbria. And on behalf of that partnership, last year CAFS won $2.5 million from the National Lottery to help resource the Zero Carbon Cumbria Partnership to do more of that broad and light and narrow and deep action, and we could be the first county to hit zero carbon. So that's a really quick intro to what CAFS is doing, but we need lots more done. So we would love to see more local authorities and businesses leading by example, getting their own operations to net zero carbon ASAP. We would like to see more local authorities and businesses using their influence on their local supply chains, using their procurement processes for goods and services to ensure their suppliers are also cutting carbon emissions, sourcing local goods. We've got a local government reorganisation coming up, which is likely to see Copeland merge with Allerdale and Carlisle. And it's a brilliant opportunity to involve Cumbrian residents much more deeply in decision making. So, for example, in things like making decisions on budgets. We'd also like to see decisions to be made that more explicitly consider the impact on the futures for young people, their quality of life, their careers, and their health and safety. I shall stop there.
That's great. Thank you very much, Karen. That's lovely. Okay, so thank you all for that input. We are going to go into some small breakout groups now for a few minutes just to have a quick